There was a time when death did not exist, before Adam and Eve disobeyed, before the fruit was taken from the tree of knowledge. Creation knew only life. The book of Genesis tells us that in Eden there was no pain, no endings, no shadow of mortality. Death was not part of the design. But that all changed with one single act. When sin entered the world, so did its consequence, the end of life. Most of us think of death as a natural part of existence, but its origins tell a very different story. According to ancient traditions, when death first appeared, God assigned one angel a task no other was willing to accept. Michael the warrior stepped aside. Gabriel the messenger showed compassion and withdrew. But one angel remained, Azrael. It was he who gathered the dust for Adam's body, and it was he who was entrusted with guiding every soul when their appointed time arrived. So who is this figure that even the mightiest angels respected and that later generations called the Angel of Death? Stay with me, because uncovering his story may change the way you see life's final mystery forever. The birth of death in Eden. In the beginning, the world was not built for endings. Genesis tells us that when Adam was placed in Eden, life itself was pure, unbroken, and eternal. The trees bore fruit without decay, the rivers flowed without drought, and no creature feared the shadow of death. There was no funeral, no mourning, no last breath. Imagine it, a world untouched by time's cruelty, a creation where every heartbeat was meant to go on forever. But with one decision, everything changed. When Adam and Eve took the fruit from the tree, God had forbidden sin entered creation. And with sin came its companion, death. This was not simply punishment. It was consequence, the natural result of breaking fellowship with the source of life. For the first time in history, the human story was given an ending. The dust from which Adam had been formed would one day reclaim him. And from that moment, every generation would follow. This forgotten history gives us a sobering truth. Death was not in the blueprint of Eden. It arrived as an intruder carried in by disobedience, which raises a haunting question. If death was never part of God's original plan, then who would be entrusted to carry out this new reality, the angel chosen from the dust? Tradition tells us that when God decided to form Adam from the earth, he commanded his angels to collect dust from the ground. Yet the earth itself cried out, begging not to be torn apart. According to Jewish and Islamic writings, Michael approached but withdrew in compassion. Gabriel came near but could not lift the soil. The task was too heavy, too final for even the mightiest of angels. Then came Azrael. At this point, he was not the angel of death, only one among the host of heaven. But when commanded, he did what no other would do. He took the dust in obedience to God's word, even as the earth wept. Some traditions say he promised to return it one day. Others claim he said nothing at all. What mattered most was his willingness to complete the task. And it was that obedience, that unflinching acceptance of the hardest role that marked him for what was to come. Because of this act, Azrael was chosen as Malak al-Maut, the angel of death. His destiny would be to guide every soul from its first breath to its last, to carry out the consequence of Eden's fall with precision and silence. He would not rebel like Lucifer, nor wield a sword like Michael, nor bring words like Gabriel. His calling was harder to end stories. And this leaves us with a chilling reflection. Sometimes the roles we fear most are the ones God entrusts to his most faithful servants. Azrael's willingness to take the dust set him apart. But what did that mean for the rest of humanity, and how does his mission stretch from Eden all the way to our own time. Would you like me to continue right away with the next two sections, the role of the angel of death in the Reach of Azrael? Or pause here so you can review these first great. Let's move forward into the next two sections of the main body, staying faithful to the outline and rotating narrative styles. The role of the angel of death. Once Azrael was appointed as Malak al-Maut, the angel of death, his responsibility stretched far beyond the moment of a single life's end. In Islamic and Jewish traditions, his task is described not simply as removing the soul, but guiding it, acting as a psychopomp, a bridge between this life and the next. He separates body from soul at the appointed time, then ensures the soul begins its journey toward what awaits, whether judgment rest or eternal reward. Some traditions describe Azrael carrying a great scroll or a book where the names of all living people are recorded. When a person is born, their name is added. When they die, it is erased. This image communicates something profound. Life and death are not random. Azrael does not choose when to act. He moves only when God commands his work, tied directly to divine authority. This makes him very different from other well-known angels. Michael commands armies in battle. Gabriel carries messages of revelation. But Azrael stands apart. His role touches every single human being. His mission is not rare, not limited to moments of prophecy or war. It is constant, unending, woven into the rhythm of human history. Consider the weight of that calling. To be present at the last breath of every king and every servant, every prophet and every rebel, every child and every elder. In one way or another, every human life ends with Azrael's presence. And yet, as terrifying as that may sound, his role is not cruelty, but order. Without him, there would be no completion, no transition, no continuation of the divine plan. But Azrael's reach goes even further than a single soul at a time. His work expands across nations, generations, and entire moments of history. The Reach of Azrael. If you've ever wondered whether your life truly matters to heaven, consider this. Traditions teach that Azrael is aware of every living soul on earth. His task spans continents, languages, and lifetimes. Unlike angels whose roles are tied to specific missions, Azrael's reach is universal. Every person who has ever lived or will live will encounter his presence at their appointed time. Ancient writings describe him not as working alone, but as leading a host of subordinate angels, often called angels of death. In times of war, famine, or disaster, these assistants carry out his work under his command, reaching countless lives at once. Yet there are also moments when Azrael himself appears directly, especially to prophet saints and those whose lives carry unique significance. Think about the scope of that. While our daily lives feel small, fleeting, even hidden, there is no life unseen. If every soul is attended to, then even the least of us is known and remembered at the end. For many, that is a fearful thought. But for others, it can be strangely comforting. Death does not arrive by accident or chaos. It is part of a design overseen with precision and order. And here is where the mystery deepens. The traditions say that Azrael's appearance is unlike any other angel, his form almost beyond imagination. If his reach extends over every soul, what kind of being must he be to carry such a weight? The terrifying form of Azrael. Imagine a being so vast, so overwhelming, that human language struggles to capture his shape. Islamic sources describe Azrael's form as beyond comprehension. 4 faces gazing in every direction, north, southeast, and west, so that no life escapes his awareness. His wings number in the thousands, some radiant with mercy, others forged with iron hooks and blades, symbols of the different ways death may arrive. Scholars wrote of Azrael possessing tens of thousands of limbs, each one extending his presence across the earth, enabling him to reach countless souls at once. And then comes the most haunting detail. His body is covered with eyes and tongues. Each eye watches over a living soul, each tongue symbolizes the voice of a life still in motion. When a person dies, one of those eyes closes, one of those tongues vanishes. In that moment, a part of Azrael himself disappears, reflecting the end of another story in the human journey. Tradition paints him not as a creature of cruelty, but of function. His vastness is not for spectacle, but necessity. To carry the burden of every death across history, he must embody the scale of creation itself. And yet within this cosmic power lies a mystery that unsettled even heaven's greatest. If Azrael's form truly mirrors all living souls, then he is not only the angel of death, he is a living reflection of humanity's fragile existence. But as terrifying as his form appears, the way Azrael reveals himself is not the same for every soul. And that brings us into one of the most fascinating truths about his mission: the dual nature of Azrael. Tradition teaches that Azrael does not appear in a single fixed form. Instead, he is shaped by the state of the soul he comes to meet. For the righteous, he may appear radiant calm, even comforting. For the prophets and saints, Azrael is said to have arrived gently offering an invitation rather than a demand. Stories claim that when Moses and the prophet Muhammad faced their final moments, it was Azrael himself, not an assistant, who came, his presence reverent and filled with dignity. But for those who hardened their hearts, who lived with cruelty and rebellion, Azrael is described very differently. To such souls, he becomes fear itself, cold, heavy, and unavoidable. Instead of a gentle lifting, their souls are said to feel torn away, their final moments, a reflection of their life's choices. Sufi teachers explained it this way: Azrael shows himself as the mirror of the soul. Peace meets peace. Turmoil meets turmoil. In this, death becomes not only an end, but a revelation. This duality is both humbling and sobering. The same angel who escorts one person like a trusted guardian may strike terror into another as the embodiment of dread. And so the question lingers: what would his face be to you, Azrael, in dreams and visions? Not every encounter with Azrael happens at the final breath. Across centuries, traditions from Jewish mysticism to Islamic Sufism have recorded stories of Azrael appearing in visions or dreams. These moments often served as warnings, reminders, or invitations for the living to prepare their souls. In some accounts, people on the edge of death saw Azrael in gentle human form, his presence giving them time to accept what was to come. In others, his arrival in dreams was unsettling, a call to repentance, a reminder that time was short. Persian poet and philosopher Nasir Khusraw wrote of a dream where Azrael appeared and told him his time was near. This vision drove him into reflection and prayer. The great mystic Rumi also described his own death as a wedding night, recalling that Azrael approached him not with terror, but with serenity, guiding him toward divine union. These examples show us that Azrael's mission is not only an ending, but a preparation. He appears when heaven wants the soul to take notice, whether through peace or through warning. Dreams and visions remind us that the angel of death is not always a figure of surprise. Sometimes he arrives early through symbols and whispers, so that the soul has the chance to face eternity ready. And yet, even with these glimpses of comfort, the truth remains. Azrael's presence carried a weight so great that even the angels themselves paused in fear. Why even angels feared him? Why would beings as mighty as Michael, Gabriel, and even Lucifer fear Azrael? It wasn't because he carried a sword or commanded armies or spoke fiery prophecies. It was because his presence meant one thing: the end. Every mission of the angels, whether to deliver revelation, to fight evil, or to protect God's people, was subject to time. And when Azrael appeared, time was over. Some traditions say that even the bearers of the throne, among the largest and most powerful angels in creation, lowered their gaze when Azrael entered their realm. He did not outrank them, nor outshine them in glory, but his role was absolute. He represented the final line. Once he came, there was no negotiation, no turning back. Think about that for a moment. Even angels, beings untouched by sin, knew that Azrael's silence carried a kind of authority beyond words. If they stepped aside in reverence, what does that mean for us, who live with the reality of death every day? Perhaps it is not only fear that Azrael inspires, but also recognition that life's fragility makes every moment sacred. And yet the mystery goes deeper. For some, Azrael was not simply the angel who delivered death. Some traditions claim he became something greater, death itself, Azrael, and the creation of death. In many traditions, death itself was not merely an event, but a creation, a being formed by God. Some narrations describe death being presented before the angels, so overwhelming in appearance that even the strongest among them fainted for 1,000 years. Imagine the terror of witnessing such a force, the very boundary between life and what comes after. And yet this force did not rule Azrael. Instead, God placed Azrael over death, commanding him to wield authority where others could not stand. He did not follow death, death followed him. In this way, Azrael became more than a servant of the end. He embodied it. His silence, his certainty, his presence marked the final chapter of every story. One tradition even looks ahead to the end of all time. After Judgment Day, when every soul is assigned to paradise or hell, God will bring forth death itself in the form of a ram. Before the eyes of all creation, that ram will be slain, and death will be no more. And in that moment, Azrael's mission will finally close. The angel who carried the weight of every ending will step aside, his role complete, as eternity begins without shadow. It is here that Azrael's story stops being only about fear. It becomes about fulfillment. For even death itself will have an ending, and the angel of death who bore its burden across ages will lay it down at last. Azrael in culture and memory. Though his origins lie deep in Jewish, Islamic, and mystical traditions, Azrael's name has traveled far beyond sacred texts. In poetry, literature, and even modern culture, he became a symbol of the mystery of death itself. American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow once described Azrael as a solemn figure who gently collects souls, casting him not as a villain, but as a quiet companion. Leigh Hunt, in his piece, The Reaper and the Flowers, portrayed him as a figure of mercy rather than cruelty, reimagining the angel of death as a guide instead of a terror. Even British writer G.K. Chesterton wove Azrael into his poetry, emphasizing his role as a spiritual force in times of great conflict. Centuries later, the name appeared in surprising places: a villain's cat in the cartoon The Smurfs, or dark characters in novels and films, proof that his presence continues to echo through human imagination. Whether in sacred belief or secular art, Azrael remains tied to humanity's deepest questions about life's end. And perhaps this is the most striking legacy. Across scripture, story, and culture, Azrael is remembered not only as the angel who ends lives, but as the reminder that death itself is not random. It is part of a design, part of a story, part of the journey every soul must take. Death is one of the few realities we all must face, yet the story of Azrael reminds us it was never meant to be random, cruel, or meaningless. His presence throughout history testifies that even in endings, there is order, and even in silence, there is purpose. To some, he is terrifying, to others, comforting. But in every account, he stands as proof that life is seen, known, and held within God's design. Perhaps the deeper lesson is this: the way we live shapes the way we see the end. Azrael reflects the truth of each soul back to itself. For those who walk in faith, his presence becomes a doorway into peace. For those who resist, he becomes a mirror of regret. And so the question comes to us: if today were your last day, what reflection would you see? In a world where death often feels like the great interrupter, Azrael's mission reminds us it is also the great transition. The same God who entrusted him with this weight is the God who promises that death itself will one day be defeated. Until then, every ending carries a whisper that eternity is still ahead. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of Scripture's most mysterious figures. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to something new, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more hidden truths that bring the Bible's mysteries to light. Until we meet again, may you walk with wisdom, live with faith, and know that the God who writes every name also holds your future in his hands.